In this lesson, we'll concentrate on these vertical and lateral flight director modes. They can be selected with or without the autopilot. Firstly, standby mode. As with the HSI select button, the effect depends on whether the autopilot is engaged or not. With the autopilot engaged, touch the standby button to see what happens. Standby will cancel any existing active and armed flight director modes. The autopilot stays engaged, so the flight director reverts to basic modes and the command bars stay on. But with the autopilot not engaged, touch the standby button again. The autopilot stays disengaged. Flight director modes are cancelled, but this time the command bars are removed. So standby has no effect on autopilot or yaw damper engagement. However, as well as clearing modes, it also clears any flight director abnormal messages on the flight mode annunciator. Now, lateral modes. The heading lateral mode is used to intercept and maintain a magnetic heading. You select the desired heading with either glare shield heading knob, then select heading mode. Touch the heading button on the flight guidance controller. Heading select becomes the active lateral mode, with the mode change emphasized in reverse video, and the autopilot rolls the aircraft onto the new heading. Heading select remains as the lateral mode until you select another lateral mode, or until there's an automatic capture of a lateral mode, or you press standby or HSI select, or there's a relevant processor or data malfunction. VOR mode is used to automatically intercept, capture and track a VOR radio. Heading select mode is used initially, then the flight director automatically changes to VOR capture, track and overstation submodes. Select the nav source, VOR 1 or 2, on the flying pilot side, and make sure that the correct station is tuned on the ARC2. If necessary, set the course pointer for the course radial, and the heading bug for the desired intercept. Then you push the nav button on the flight guidance controller. Touch the nav button. VOR becomes the lateral armed mode. Heading select becomes the lateral active mode, even if not already selected, and the aircraft continues on its intercept heading. Timing of the capture depends upon heading speed and angle. The aircraft banks, and the EHSI deviation bar starts to center. And within 2 dots on the deviation scale, the capture maneuver starts. The mode is VOR capture, with the change highlighted. When stabilized, tracking the VOR radial, the star disappears, again with temporary reverse video to get your attention. In the zone of confusion near a VOR station, when the VOR deviation signal is very erratic, you may temporarily see the VOR overstation mode. In overstation mode, the flight director doesn't use the VOR deviation signal, but commands the aircraft to the selected course. The mode reverts to capture or track when the signal improves. Localizer mode is a lateral mode to capture and track a localizer beam only. ILS approach mode is a combined lateral and vertical mode which captures the localizer, then goes on to capture and track a glide slope beam. Firstly, localizer mode for airports with no glide slope. Operation is the same as VOR mode. With the ILS source selected on the active nav source selector knob, an ILS frequency tuned on the ARC2, the heading intercept selected, and course pointer for the runway selected, you use the nav push button to arm localizer mode. Touch the nav push button. The localizer is armed, and the localizer scale comes into view on the PFD. You then automatically capture and track the beam with the usual transitions. If the runway is equipped with a glide slope, you arm ILS approach with the approach push button. Touch the approach push button. Normally, you would use the approach push button initially at the start of the approach, instead of using the nav push button. The glide slope is armed, but glide slope capture is disabled until in localizer capture or localizer track modes. The aircraft is below the glide slope beam. Next, the flight director automatically captures and tracks the glide slope. If everything is normal, with the EFIS ADC and attitude heading source selectors at norm, with both VOR lock receivers tuned to the same localizer, when you start to track the localizer and glide slope at 1100 feet, verify that you're in the Cat2 dual FD submode. Both HSI white lights should come on. In the dual submode, both flight guidance modules independently display flight director commands and use independent data sources for their own side PFD. The dual FD annunciation indicates that you're in the correct configuration for a Cat2 landing. Should there be any malfunction, you'll see a Cat2 fail message flashing for 5 seconds. LNAV mode can be engaged to track a lateral flight path computed by the FMS. With the FMS selected as a nav source and a lateral flight plan active on the FMS, touch the nav push button to engage LNAV mode. LNAV is the active lateral mode, and the FMS controls the autopilot and flight director instructions. Note that there are no arm and capture phases in LNAV mode. The FMS will give commands for lateral maneuvers to the automatic flight control system to automatically follow the flight plan. Back course mode is very rarely used. It lets you intercept, capture and track a back course localizer. Back course is the same as front course, but BC replaces lock. This button selects VOR approach mode. VOR approach is almost identical to VOR mode, but should be used in the approach flight phase. It has different tolerances. The indications are approach arm, approach capture, approach track, and approach overstation. Now the vertical modes. For vertical modes, it's your responsibility to use the correct power settings. Firstly, altitude hold mode. Altitude hold maintains the existing altitude. The autopilot will level off the aircraft. To cancel altitude hold, you can move the pitch thumb wheel to climb or descend, use TCS, or select another vertical mode. We've seen altitude select mode, used to select and capture an altitude. But note that if you move the thumb wheel or change the pre-selected altitude during the capture phase, this may cancel the capture maneuver. You've been cleared to descend to 20,000 feet. Touch the Alt knob to select this altitude. No, the Alt knob. Now press Altitude Select. Altitude Select is the armed mode. We'll now use Vertical Speed mode. Vertical speed, the normal mode during descent, is used to maintain a constant vertical speed. Touch the VS push button. VS and the vertical reference speed in feet per minute at the time of engagement is announced in the vertical mode. You can use the thumb wheel and TCS to change the target reference speed. When descending to within 1,000 feet of the pre-selected altitude, the alert goes reverse video yellow, and as you capture the altitude, Alt Capture is active, initially in reverse video, then normal, followed by Alt in reverse video, then normal. Another important vertical mode is indicated airspeed. Indicated airspeed used during climb or descent maintains your speed at the time of engagement. Touch the IAS push button. The target reference speed is displayed in the active vertical mode. When you reduce power, you descend at the target reference airspeed. The pitch thumb wheel on the flight guidance controller lets you change reference speed. Touch the pitch wheel. You've decreased reference speed, and with the same power settings, you now climb. Remember to reset and rearm the new desired altitude. You can also use tactile control steering to change attitude and reset indicated airspeed. Now the final vertical mode, vertical navigation, VNAV mode. VNAV acquires and holds a vertical flight path computed by the FMS. With FMS selected as the nav source, with a lateral flight plan active, and LNAV as the flight director lateral node, and with a vertical FMS flight path active, you can engage VNAV in vertical mode. Touch the VNAV button. VNAV is armed, and the VNAV vertical deviation scale appears with the magenta V showing the vertical path and the magenta diamond showing your position. When the FMS captures the vertical path, VNAV path becomes the active mode. If you use the VNAV flight level change submode to control climb or descent according to a constant speed target, the target is displayed on the ASI. We'll cover VNAV in more detail in the FMS lessons. Finally, go-around mode. Press the go-around button. The autopilot disconnects, and the flight director commands 10 degrees pitch up and wings level. Wings level becomes the lateral mode, and GA the vertical mode. Go-around mode is active until you select another flight director mode or engage the autopilot. The autopilot disengage message is reset if you press the go-around button a second time.